In the closing months of the Second World War, Japan faced the inevitable. Its empire, once vast and proud, was collapsing under the relentless weight of Allied power. Cities lay in ruins. The sky itself, once a shield, now rained fire. And in the middle of this chaos, one final symbol of Japan's naval pride still stood, the battleship Yamato. She was more than steel and guns. She was a monument to ambition, to engineering, and to the dream of invincibility. But by 1945, that dream was dying. And the Yamato, the largest battleship ever built, was about to embark on her final voyage. A voyage that every man aboard knew would be one way. The Yamato was born from a nation that believed in destiny. In the late 1930s, as tensions flared across the Pacific, Japan sought to build something unmatched, a weapon that could dominate any sea. In secret, at the Kure Naval Arsenal, thousands of workers labored to construct a battleship so immense that no foreign spy was allowed to glimpse her. Her hull stretched over 860 feet. Her guns, 9 massive 18-inch cannons, could fire shells the weight of a small car more than 25 miles. No ship on Earth could match her firepower or her armor. To her builders, Yamato was the embodiment of Japan's spirit, a floating fortress that represented the emperor himself. When she entered service in 1941, Japan still believed in the supremacy of the battleship, the doctrine that whoever ruled the seas ruled the world. But only months later, that belief began to crumble. December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor. The age of the battleship ended the very moment it began to shine. Aircraft, not armor, became the new masters of war. The Yamato, designed for duels with other warships, would spend most of her life hiding from planes she could barely defend against. She fired her great guns only a handful of times in anger. While smaller ships and carrier planes decided the fate of the Pacific, the Yamato often sat idle, too precious to risk, too outdated to truly matter. The pride of Japan became its prisoner. By 1945, Japan's navy was shattered. Fuel was scarce. Training was rushed. Air cover was almost non-existent. The American fleet, meanwhile, surrounded the home islands like an iron wall. It was then, in a moment of desperation, that Japan's high command conceived a final plan, Operation Tengo. A last strike of defiance. The Yamato would sail to Okinawa, where Allied forces were invading, and beach herself on the island's shore. There, her guns would serve as stationary artillery until she was destroyed. A suicide mission. A death march at sea. On April 6, 1945, the order was given. The Yamato would sail at dawn, escorted by a handful of destroyers. No air cover. No refueling stop. Enough fuel only for a one-way journey. Admiral Seiichi Ito, commanding the mission, knew exactly what it meant. He gathered his officers and said quietly, "We will fight bravely, and die honorably. That is all that remains." Aboard the ship, over 3,000 men prepared for their final voyage. Some wrote farewell letters. Some prayed. Others simply stared into the ocean, silent, resolved. At 10:30 that morning, Yamato and her escort ships slipped out of Tokuyama harbor. The rising sun glinted off her armor, a final reflection of glory. Below deck, the engines rumbled like thunder, pushing 70,000 tons of steel toward destiny. But the Americans knew she was coming. By 1945, the U.S. Navy's reconnaissance network covered nearly every Japanese port. Submarines had sighted her departure. Radio transmissions confirmed it. And the response was immediate. More than 300 aircraft, fighters, bombers, and torpedo planes, were dispatched from Task Force 58. Their target, the last giant of the Imperial Navy. April 7, 1945, 12:20 p.m. Off the coast of Kyushu, American radar detected Yamato. The sea was calm. The sky was clear. And in that silence, the world's largest battleship steamed toward her fate. At 12:32, the first formation of American planes appeared on the horizon. The alarm bells rang throughout the ship. Anti-aircraft gunners raced to their stations. The calm sea exploded into chaos. The sky darkened with the roar of engines. Bombs fell like rain. Torpedoes sliced through the water, trailing white wakes toward the giant. The Yamato fought back fiercely. Her anti-aircraft batteries spat fire into the air, bringing down several planes. Men cheered, then screamed as explosions ripped through her decks. Within minutes, torpedoes struck her port side. Water flooded compartments. The ship began to list. Still, she pressed on. Her gunners, drenched in sweat and smoke, kept firing until ammunition ran dry. The crew sealed off flooding compartments with bare hands, some locking themselves behind watertight doors to save others. It was courage without hope. Another wave of bombers arrived. Explosions rocked the deck. Fire spread across the midsection. One of her main turrets was knocked out. Men were thrown into the sea, hundreds at a time. Admiral Ito stood on the bridge, watching calmly. He had already sent a final message to Tokyo. May the Emperor live 10,000 years. Then he ordered the crew to abandon ship, though few could. At 2:20 p.m., a massive torpedo struck near the magazine. A chain reaction followed. The Yamato's ammunition stores ignited, triggering one of the largest non-nuclear explosions ever seen. A blinding flash tore through the sky. Witnesses miles away saw a mushroom cloud rise nearly 4 miles high. When the smoke cleared, the Yamato was gone. Out of more than 3,300 men aboard, only 269 survived. The rest were lost to the deep, the last warriors of a dying empire. The Americans, returning to their carriers, were silent. They had destroyed a legend, but they had also witnessed the end of an era. The Yamato's final voyage was not just the story of a ship. It was the story of a nation's final act of defiance, and of the men who followed orders even when they knew they would never return. For Japan, the loss of Yamato symbolized the death of the Imperial Navy's pride. For the world, it marked the end of the battleship age, replaced forever by the reign of air power. Today, the wreck of Yamato rests silently at the bottom of the East China Sea, 1,200 feet below the surface. Her twisted steel still bears the scars of that final battle. But even there, beneath the cold darkness, she tells a story. A story of human courage in the face of hopelessness. Of pride, and loss. Of how even the mightiest creations of man can vanish in an instant. And above all, a reminder, that war, for all its glory, ends the same way for all who fight it. In silence. In the final days of the Pacific War, the Yamato's name became legend. To some, she was a symbol of tragic futility. To others, she represented honor, the last stand of a nation unwilling to surrender. But to history, she remains both, a monument to the courage of those who fought, and a warning of the cost of blind ambition. The Yamato sailed not for victory, but for remembrance. Her crew knew it. Their commanders knew it. And the sea itself seemed to know it, as it closed over her burning decks. When the flames finally faded and the waves grew calm, the Pacific was quiet again. The greatest battleship ever built had vanished beneath it. But her story, her legacy, would never sink. Because sometimes, the end of one ship tells the story of an entire war. And the Yamato's end was the Pacific's final echo. This was the final voyage of Battleship Yamato. A story of power, of pride, and of the sea that remembers everything.